Amber Alerts were invented in 1996. Most people who own smartphones are familiar with these jarring alerts. Occasionally, our phones will light up with a distressing noise and a warning to keep an eye out for a certain person, vehicle, or victim. These alerts are meant to mobilize the public and get more eyes on a missing child case. Sofia Lucerno Juarez was the first child in Washington state to be featured in an Amber Alert. She vanished in 2003 and has never been found. Sofia was born to Maria Juarez, an unmarried 16-year-old who continued living with her parents after reaching adulthood so she could better care for her daughter. She had a brother who the media mentions very rarely. On February 4th, 2003, Sofia was playing with her brother. It was the night before her 5th birthday. Sofia decided she wanted to go to a store that was located about 5 blocks away from the house. Her grandmother's boyfriend, Jose Lopez Torres, who I believe also lived with the family, was already planning on driving to the store. Sofia rushed downstairs to ask her mother for permission to go with Jose, and her mother gave her $1 to spend at the store. Then, she sent Sofia out the door. However, nobody actually watched the 4-year-old leave. Many people online criticized the mother for not watching her daughter exit the house. However, there were at least 2 other children in the house that Maria may have been responsible for watching, and she probably assumed Sofia would easily catch up with Jose, who was likely only in the driveway or out on the street in front of their house. I should also mention that the family lived in a good neighborhood. The family lived in middle-class suburbs, and as a result, had probably been lured into a false sense of security. This sense of security would quickly be shattered. About an hour after Sofia supposedly left for the store, Jose returned. This is when Maria discovered that Sofia had never caught up with Jose. He hadn't even known the girl was planning to come with him. Sofia was nowhere to be found. Her family immediately contacted police, who treated Sofia's case like an abduction from the start. They released the Amber Alert, which stayed active for the first 36 hours of Sofia's disappearance. Police, firefighters, and volunteers meticulously combed the area in a 3-mile radius from the family's house. No sign of Sofia was found. Sofia's 10-year-old cousin, who had been in the house at the time of Sofia's disappearance, came forward claiming that she had seen Sofia walking down the sidewalk with a man dressed in all black. However, Sofia was a shy child, unlikely to approach strangers. Maria was firmly convinced that whoever had taken Sofia already knew her. It had to have been somebody that Sofia was familiar with and trusted to a certain extent, or she would have remembered stranger danger and felt uncomfortable approaching them. The police extensively questioned Jose, but eventually cleared him as a suspect. They also questioned Sofia's biological father, who had never actually met the girl. Her father was incredibly cooperative and willing to work with police, and he was also eventually ruled out as a suspect. Finally, the police questioned a sex offender that lived in Sofia's neighborhood, but to the best of my understanding, he had been charged with relatively minor assaults, none of which were carried out against children. He, too, was eventually ruled out. Sofia's case was very publicized, partly because she was the first child to receive an Amber Alert in Washington state, but even so, no real leads or evidence came forward. Even after extending the search to Mexico, where her family still had connections, nothing surfaced. Nothing of hers or from her was ever found, nor did the police of either country ever get concrete tips that led to real lines of investigation. In May 2003, authorities told the public to be on the lookout for a mid-90s, full-sized, faded orange van with a license plate that included a double J. They don't have any real reason to suspect this fan, other than the fact that numerous people report seeing it in the area the night of Sophia's disappearance, and the police are trying to exhaust all leads. The owner of the van has never come forward, but witnesses believe he was a Caucasian man in his 40s or 50s with a thick blonde mustache. Again, the police don't necessarily suspect this man of anything, but they do want to officially rule the vehicle and its driver out of their investigation since they have virtually no other leads. Now, usually I love diving into the online forums regarding missing persons cases. Since so many people contribute to them, I am usually faced with a slew of new perspectives or theories that sometimes even the police haven't covered. I've expressed my admiration for those forums in past videos. That admiration in no way extends to Sophia's case. There is something that feels racially charged about the forums regarding Sophia's case. Sophia was of Mexican descent, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm sure we have all heard the racist stereotypes that Mexicans are involved with drugs or abusive towards their children. Sadly, these stereotypes spill over into Sophia's case. There are many rumors circulating online that Sophia's family was involved with drugs. People claim anything from Jose being a drug dealer to her mother having done something to Sophia to get drugs. That's also a common online conspiracy, that Sophia's family murdered her and covered it up. Absolutely no evidence supports either of these theories. In fact, I have no idea where anyone got these ideas. Nothing in any official news articles or information databases claims that Sophia's family was, in any way, abusive or linked to illegal drugs. Also, there were at least 5 people in the house that night, excluding Sophia. It seems very unlikely to me that all 5 of them would be so tight-lipped on what happened to Sophia if something indeed happened to her inside the house. It's not easy to get away with murder, despite what some troubling cold cases or pieces of fiction might have you believe. Especially not when your victim is an innocent 4-year-old girl whose disappearance sparks international outrage. The true crime community knows that sometimes police fail missing children. But the police did not fail Sophia. They searched extensively, recruiting the help of other countries' police departments and local volunteers. It seems unlikely to me that her family, if they were responsible for Sophia's disappearance, would cover it up so well that absolutely no concrete hint of their crime would emerge in the decades following. I am seriously disgusted by the leaps and bounds people online have taken to try to blame someone in Sophia's family for her disappearance. If there was even a whisper of suspicion from the police, these public accusations might have some real base. As it is, these rumors are, at best, wildly misleading, and at worst, racially charged distractions from a tragic, volatile case. I only saw one good online theory as to what happened to Sophia. One Reddit user was reminded of a story about a boy from their childhood who had been left alone to walk 2 miles home because of a multi-layered miscommunication between his mother and grandmother. It was winter and getting late, and the boy was cold, tired, and scared. A stranger pulled over and asked if he wanted a ride. And although the boy knew about stranger danger, he was so cold and tired that he accepted the ride. That boy was older than Sophia, and while that anecdote could be fiction, the reasoning behind it still stands. Perhaps Sophia realized that Jose had left without her, but really wanted to go to the store, wishing to spend her dollar. So she started off by herself, only for a stranger to offer to walk with her. The stranger could even claim to want to protect Sophia, or pretend to know someone in her family. Children are often far more trusting than we would like to believe. However, this is pure conjecture on my part and the part of the Redditor. When Sophia disappeared, She stood at 3 feet tall and weighed 33 pounds. Both of her ears were pierced, and she had black hair and brown eyes. She had a mole under one of her eyes and was missing her top 4 front teeth. She was wearing a red, long-sleeved shirt, blue overalls, violet socks, white Converse sneakers, and hoop earrings. Please, if you have any information on Sophia or her disappearance, contact the corresponding numbers in the description below. The case of Roland Jack Spencer III, a Native American child living in the Yakama Reserve in Washington state, is a heartbreaking one. When the child was 2 years old, his mother, Celestine Faye Spencer Yallop, vanished. On November 11, 1981, 2 weeks after her disappearance, she was found dead from hypothermia at the bottom of a gully off McCulloch Road. The toddler was sent to live with his great-aunt, but his troubles didn't stop there. Roland was heavily and permanently mentally and physically disabled. By the time he was 3 years old, he couldn't walk more than 12 feet without falling over, and could only say mama, dada, and do. Because of this, he earned the nickname Do Boy. Roland was also incredibly hard of hearing and suffered from a dangerous form of epilepsy. If the seizure condition was left untreated, he would slip into a coma and eventually die. So when the 3-year-old vanished on May 25, 1984 from Apato, Washington, the stakes were high. He had vanished from the area of Night Lane and Campbell Road. The information on his disappearance is incredibly limited. Who was with him when he disappeared? What was he doing in that area? When was he reported missing? Were there any clues or tips initially? How did the police react to his case? None of that information is anywhere online. In fact, hardly anyone online talks about Roland. As I'm sure you've all already guessed by the nature of my channel, the child was never found. There are also no clues or hints as to what might have happened to him, although police at the moment classify his disappearance as a non-family abduction. Like I said, this case is barely discussed. Roland is probably dead because of his seizure condition, since he didn't have his medication with him when he vanished, and was pronounced dead in 2000 so his family could get some closure. However, his memorial page has been removed from the internet, and he's usually only mentioned in passing in articles about other missing children. Slowly, it seems, the world is starting to forget Roland. Celestine's case was reopened in 2009 by the FBI as part of their investigation into a string of murders and disappearances that had plagued the indigenous female communities of Washington state. These murders and disappearances took place in the 80s and 90s, which is when Celestine vanished and was eventually found dead. While Celestine's case hasn't yet been connected to the other murders and disappearances, the FBI must consider that perhaps she didn't disappear of her own accord. Indigenous women in America and Canada are far more at risk for violence than other groups. So while Celestine did die from hypothermia, there's no telling if she was out there by that gully of her own free will. There's very little information about Celestine online either. I wonder if she had some sort of mental illness or struggles which would lead to her becoming suicidal. Perhaps she had poor judgment and had simply fallen victim to the cold weather of the season. Or perhaps someone, the same someone who kidnapped and killed other Indigenous women, was responsible for her fate. I would hope police investigated all of these possibilities when Celestine initially vanished, but having seen the trends of a lack of police interest in Indigenous cases, I don't have a good feeling about this case either. When Roland vanished, he stood at 2 feet 5 inches tall and weighed 25 pounds. He was of Native American descent and has a scar on his abdomen. He had black hair and brown eyes. At the time of his disappearance, he was wearing a red t-shirt with striped sleeves, corduroy pants, and tan-colored boots. He may go by his middle name Jack if, through some miracle, he is still alive. Because of the young age at which he disappeared, neither dental records nor DNA samples exist for Roland. However, if you are related to Roland and wish to give your DNA in order to help the case, I've included a phone number in the description that you can contact to set that up. The phone number belongs to a retired law enforcement officer who has dedicated her retirement to helping solve the Washington cases of missing Indigenous people and the cases of Indigenous people at large. She will be able to get you in contact with the proper authorities. Please don't use that phone number for high priority information, however. Any urgent news about Roland's case should go to the police precinct investigating his disappearance. Please, if you have any information on Roland or what happened to him, contact the corresponding numbers in the description below. Please, help bring these missing children home.